wandering through the aisles of my art store. I bought myself a Pictomicron and some Bristol board. I made a fancy comic, and now I am all set to be the greatest web cartoonist on the fucking internet. I'll have a forum and a blog and links from DVD. I'll get reviewed by a web snark and the William G. The world can be a oyster. I think it's a safe bet when you're the greatest web cartoonist on the fucking internet. When you're the greatest web cartoonist on the fucking
Hi. Woo! Yes, welcome to the Urfspace podcast. I guess I'm hosting today. My name is Amber Greenlee. You can find me all online as ArtGlitch. We got Chuck Wellen, who had his successful Kickstarter completed last week. I believe at or around $5,500 was raised total for his books and his CD and the book CD collection. And, if you were part of that, thank you so much, because without, people buying things, creatives can't eat. So thank you. And then we got Chris Paro, the Citrus Kids, and he has his preferred playlist for the Citrus Kids after his name there, if you guys want to check it out. And then our guest today is Troy Antoine LaFaye, which we just worked out. He and I've known each other for like 13 years, maybe like 15 years, 16 years, somewhere in there. It depends on when you want to, because I'm not sure exactly where in TV I met you. But where he and I met, we were doing a for adults puppet show called Transylvania Television. And he was one of the puppeteers and characters, and also the cameraman and one of the writers. And, wore many hats for that production and has continued to wear many hats since. And so, yes, let us talk about your many hats, which are reenactment and cosplay and movies and indie movies. Ooh.
Correct. Yeah. I also, I teach as well. So.
Oh, wonderful. So yeah, let's start. Where do you want to start, with history?
I don't know. Let's start with movie stuff, maybe, and then we'll kind of sneak into the weirder stuff later.
Well,
I don't want to scare people away right away.
Well, maybe we should go over TV because that's where you and I met. And
this is Toby, by the way.
Hi, Toby. Toby's
decided that it's petting time, so I apologize.
Toby realizes the internet is looking at him.
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah.
He's really the guest. I'm just the guy. I'm just the monkey boy that's petting him.
You can just translate.
Exactly. Transylvania Television. So Transylvania Television is the, let's see, what's our tagline? It's been a while. The retro monster comedy that's really not for kids. It was the brainchild of a gentleman by the name of Gordon Smooter, and another gentleman by the name of Michael Hegel. So Michael and I got roped in through Michael. Michael and I have known each other since college. He was going to one Wisconsin university, and I was going to a different one. And my roommate in the dorms worked at the same restaurant over the summer that Michael did. And I used to call my roommate back when people actually used the phone, and just to check out how his summer was doing. And he said, "Man, you got to meet this weird guy that I work with. Like, he comes to work with like Freddy Krueger gloves on. You guys would get along great."
Yes, that's the way you do it.
Yeah. So,
hello.
This is also weird because
I get confused with Freddy Krueger and Wolverine. They're like
Wolverine's
the good guy, right? Freddy Krueger's the bad, because like Freddy Krueger started getting more good and Wolverine started getting more bad, and I'm not sure which one is which.
Yeah, how weird is that?
Yeah. So TV. I got roped in from Gordon, and he and we met at a Fault Con where he had all of the puppets behind him, and I'm like, oh, I used to do puppets because I did them with Steve Troop, and then and so I got roped in because he's like, when he was rounding up people he knew had done puppets, I was one of those people.
Yeah, I don't know how Michael and I don't remember exactly how Michael and Gordon got connected. I think Michael and I had
Minneapolis is a small town, and
puppetry's a small world, isn't it? I mean, that's what we should tell the kids. If you want to do puppetry, then just start doing puppetry. And you'll find some other people that like puppetry. Before you know it, you'll be doing your own television show.
It wasn't through puppetry that they were connected. I think we had done we had gone to a local. It wasn't through that either. Oddly enough.
Oh, okay.
We had done a feature, and through another friend of ours, we had been invited as a guest of honor at a big sci-fi convention in town called Convergence.
Yes.
And I think when we were getting ready to do our second feature, we put out a call for people to help us out through that community, and somehow Gordon had connected to us because he was pretty heavily involved in the local fan community as well. And so he actually came on board for our second feature called Planetfall, which was a sci-fi feature, and he was doing like production design kind of stuff, set dressing, costuming.
Well, what were you doing on Planetfall?
I was one of the producers. I was the production manager. I was the camera operator. And I have a part in the movie as well.
See, many hats.
Very
many.
So
wear many hats.
Can I back this up a little bit?
Yeah.
This is a movie, like a film that got released to festivals, or is this like a broadcast thing on local TV or the internet?
You can find it on DVD. I know that.
So it's like a feature-length movie?
It is a feature-length movie.
Okay.
Our first feature-length movie is called Go to Hell. It was released by Troma, and we just got it back from them.
Oh, you got it back. That's
you got it back.
Yeah, we did.
How'd you get it back? Was it like wrestling match, or did you pay
money? You had to wrestle a toxic Avenger in a cage.
Yeah, but it was through email, so it was really boring.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, sorry.
It
could have been interesting.
Was it difficult?
Was it email with lawyers?
No, thankfully it was not difficult to get back from them, mainly just because they didn't really care too much about it anyway. So they're like, oh, yeah, sure. Okay, you can have it back.
All right, they're decent then. They're decent people by the sound of that then.
Well, other than losing half of our stuff, yeah they're really decent.
They lost a lot of stuff.
They lost a lot of our materials, like all of our original audio recordings are gone. So we were hoping to do we shot it on 16 millimeter film, actual film. And we were hoping to do a high res retransfer, remastering, and then maybe even shoot some new stuff and kind of bookend it with current day footage, because all of our actors are still around. And knock on wood, thankfully. Actually, no. I take that back. One of our actors just passed away a couple weeks ago. That's weird.
Oh, no.
That's really weird. Anyway, we were hoping to do that, but now we're kind of stuck. Like we literally only have the audio that is stuck to the final version of the film. So we're still trying to figure out what we can do about that. So it can be a little challenging. Anyway, our second feature, the one that we met Gordon on, is called Planetfall. Also, both of them are right around 90 minutes. That one did get a really brief release from I think it was called Heretic Films. They're unfortunately not around anymore. So you might be able to find, like, if you go on Amazon.com, you could probably get like used copies of it, of both of those films actually. But right now they're very rare and exclusive. So hard to see that.
I know the feeling. Yeah, I like this show.
Well, what other movies have you worked on in the last 13 years? I mean, it's been at least one.
Not well, recently I've worked on a whole bunch of them. I'll tell that story in a little bit, but most of the stuff I've worked on other than Transylvania Television has been either stuff I've done through the school that I worked for, a few low budget shorts here and there. I worked on a documentary for a little bit, and then oddly enough, I hadn't worked on any features since, let's see, when did we finish? We finished Planetfall, I think in 2003 is when we released it.
Mm-hmm.
No, I think that's when
20 years ago.
Yeah. And then right before the shutdown happened, January of 2020, I had known a guy from South Dakota. His name is Luke Schwetzel. Oddly, here's where the weird stuff comes in. I knew a guy through my reenacting hobby who also happened to be a filmmaker.
Which we will also get to in a minute.
Yeah. So we were both doing World War II reenacting, and I'd found out, I just had met him really casually and then found out that he was a filmmaker. And then thanks to the magic of Facebook, I kind of was seeing that he was working on projects and things like that. I was an extra a few years ago in one of his films that he shot here in Minnesota. And then in January of 2020, one of my other things that I do is I volunteer at a military museum here in Minnesota. And we have a bunch of military vehicles. And he was shooting another film and wanted to rent one of the vehicles. And so I was negotiating with that. And then they ended up having to move the film to another state, so the rental thing didn't work out. But I said, hey, I'm not doing anything that weekend. I would love to come down and hang out with you guys. And so the guy that I was talking to just sort of invited me without telling anyone that I was going to be there. And so I just showed up and kind of crashed the movie set. And I did some behind the scenes stuff. And then from that connection, Luke got to know me a little bit better. And then I've worked on all of his movies since then. So just since January of 2020, I've worked on, in fact, I just finished working on the fifth movie with him. So all low budget stuff. They're all right around like 90 minutes. Most of them are World War II movies. One of them is a Western.
Anything crossing the picket line?
No.
Good.
In fact, that's one of the things that we
all right, Abba, don't grill again.
Hey, no.
We support the strikers, but we're not going to start hurling rocks at the sky.
That wasn't even on my mind until you said that. Then I was like, oh yeah, there's the strike thing going on. I forgot about that.
Thankfully, two things. One, SAG has a special category just for independent filmmakers because they're not striking us because they know we don't have any money. We're not the ones that are holding the money from them.
Yeah.
We don't get any money from the same people they're trying to get money from. Yeah. So they do have a special track that if you are an independent filmmaker, you can file paperwork and they will allow SAG actors to work on the thing. As it turns out, though, we're shooting it in such a way that we didn't really need any SAG actors. So it was kind of either way, we would have been fine. So, but that was one of the things that kind of delayed the production is we were waiting to find out is it going to go on strike? Are we going to have to do this non-union? Is it going to be union? But either way, we were able to avoid that. We had a whole lot of other problems getting to this state with some of the money stuff, which
the money stuff's always a problem.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy out there.
Yeah.
Have you tried like crowdfunding?
We did crowdfunding for Transylvania Television.
Yeah, we had a couple successful campaigns. I remember that.
Yeah, I was trying to remember. I know we did a couple of them, and I unfortunately only remember one. We decided we wanted to do a like a Halloween special like a holiday special, kind of like Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, only for Halloween. And it went really well. We weren't trying to raise a lot of money. I think we were trying to get like $6,000, and we ended up getting about
you try to cover your costs mostly.
No one was getting rich off of it or anything.
Yeah,
we were able to raise about, I forget, I think it was like around $8,400.
It was more than that. It was about 9,000, I want to say.
Was it? Okay.
Yeah, like right when it closed, it was just over the 9,000 mark.
Yeah. And then we were able to, what we were doing is we had made a deal with the local, CW affiliate here in Minneapolis, Channel 23. We basically we were like paid programming, except we weren't selling anything. We weren't selling ShamWows or anything. So we just bought a hour-long broadcast thing, and then we were able to sell half of the ad time for that period. So we got I think we brought in another $4,000 by doing that. So,
I remember The Source advertised with us.
Yeah, The Source has always been a really big
supporter.
So how do those ad sales come about? The station manages those. Do the station say, well, we've got this slot, and then their ad sales people see if they can fill it?
Basically, yeah. The way they did it was they call advertising time inventory. It's weird. I don't know why. So there's X amount of inventory for every broadcast hour or broadcast half hour. And what they did was the station, part of their deal was not only did they get paid, I think it was like $1,200 for the 1 hour slot, but they got to also then sell half of their time on their own that they didn't share with us. But then they gave us the other half. So we had.
All right. So you split the advertising time with the station. That sounds pretty fair, I suppose. I don't know.
And you guys didn't have to find.
The part that was so cool was that we had to find the advertisers. They wouldn't help us do that.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Oh, so you had to find the advertisers. And then they kept half of that. So
no, we get to keep all of that, thankfully.
Oh, you got to keep so your quarter or your half of the ads, you had to sell those yourself. They sold their half and you had to sell your half.
It's kind of like Battle of the Bands.
Right.
Where you sell your own tickets.
Exactly.
Which is
totally a bringer show, but it was on the CW.
That's
cool.
Well, I think that's interesting. I mean, you should be able to, but it shows you've got to have. Well, it's something you could sort of offer to backers of a crowd fund, I suppose.
Yeah, is that you get ad time on TV, but I know in the case of The Source, and just explaining to Chuck and Chris what The Source was. The Source of Comics and Games is like one of the coolest stores on the planet. It has literally. This is in St. Paul, right? St. Paul or Minneapolis?
Technically Roseville, Minnesota, but the Twin City area. Yep.
Twin City area, yeah. But it has just aisles of comics and games, and they'll hold your box for 3 months, and people play their tabletops there, and they got vending machines, and they know their audience very well, and they're very supportive of the nerd community, at large.
What's it called?
The Source of Comics and Games. And I remember Nick would let me and other MCAD students draw at The Source because it had big wide tables, and he didn't stop us from like working on our comics because we're working on comics, right? And so sometimes when you just had to get away from school or something, I'd go there, and it's like working in a coffee shop, but it was just nerds coming by going, oh, that's kind of cool.
Yeah, it's cool too because it obviously their big thing is comics and games, but they also it's kind of like partly a hobby store. So like they have models and modeling supplies, tons of like geeky collectible stuff, toys, things like that. So it's sort of like one-stop shopping for.
Well, yeah, and they just, I just thought it was really cool that Nick, who, is no longer with us as well, Nick, I think he bought like 3 minutes of ads or something. Like he bought a lot for the special.
Well, they actually bought the time that bought our time slot because
okay. Sorry.
They had some. I mean, I don't. Maybe it was Nick that paid for it. I don't know. I just know the company paid for it. But because they buy a lot of their advertising was on that particular network, and so they were able to get us a price for that slot, and they put up the money to actually buy the paid programming slot, and then as a result, we gave them half of our ad time.
See, I wasn't part of that side of thing. I was on talent.
Yeah.
You guys were doing all the hard, busy stuff.
Well, that part was actually relatively easy because we knew that it was local, and so we could go to local places. We had an opportunity. We were on another network that was a national network, and then we're on another one that was just in Texas, and we could not, for the life of us, sell airtime for that because no one knew who we were. And so we couldn't get our usual people because it's like, why would a person in Minneapolis advertise to people in Texas for a local store?
I've been thinking in terms of the analogy of building a little fire, like working on the Kickstarter and all this, and that sort of worked sort of fairly well, thinking of it like that, I think. And and it's difficult. Yes, you sort of made this fire, but then all of a sudden you're sort of trying to make something fire over there, but you haven't collected the kindling or any of the bits of the wood that you have, and you're sort of trying to take out of this fire and put it over there, and you're not ready, to do that. You've got to sort of, I don't know, you've got to sort of somehow generate the interest outside of your own sphere, which is difficult. It only sort of comes, I suppose, with sort of repetition and doing it over and over. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. We even tried we're like, okay, well, how do we find a sponsor that has a national or international impact that would find this beneficial, right?
In Lubbock, Texas.
Yeah, or even I don't even remember what the name. I think it's called Tough TV. I don't even know if they're still around, but all these little low power TV stations that used to exist in the broadcast world that are now digital stations. A lot of them subscribe to this Tough TV network, and so it was potentially, I don't know what this means in reality, but potentially in 150,000 households, which still by audience standards is a very tiny amount of people. But we thought, well, someone must advertise on this network or they wouldn't exist. The network,
still 150,000 people. That's still a good number of people.
Yeah,
I'll take.
And that's households, so it's more than. It's more than 150,000 people, potentially. Although, at least half of them are probably really small people.
Your show is
What do you mean
targeted at what demographic though? It's not really kids, or is it?
Not kids.
Definitely not kids. No.
What makes it not for kids?
Yeah.
So
language or
they were cute puppets that had bad language, and let's just put it this way: we called tits yippee buckets.
Yeah, we talk about adult
yippee buckets.
We talk about adult
yippie
things,
buckets.
yeah.
There's a whole skit as to how we get to yippie buckets.
Oh, hippie buckets. Okay.
Yippee
bucket.
Yippee.
Well, all right. That's fine though. That's not offending me on the surface of it.
Well, it's another way of saying fun bags.
Yeah, I get it. I don't know. That's not so bad. I don't think you're going to traumatize any kids with that.
I mean, is it worse than Benny Hill?
But maybe in Texas, those kids are different. I don't know.
Benny Hill it's probably that's probably not quite as dirty as they are, but I take that back. We are dirty, but we were slightly more subtle than Benny Hill was about it.
Well, yes, okay. What about Meet the Feebles? Were you I never really saw? I have to admit, I never saw Meet the Feebles. I've always wanted to. I've never seen it, but I understand they're pretty gross in Meet the Feebles.
Didn't Benny Hill run?
Don't get into the gross factor, no. And we're if you were to compare us to say South Park, we're probably PG-13 compared to their almost R.
We were pretty tame compared to South Park.
They're pretty politically brave. I think that's where people would mostly be offended with South Park.
Yeah, exactly. We tried to stay pretty unpolitical if we could avoid it. So
yeah, but after TV, yes. Like, you know, I left Minneapolis, and you and I haven't seen each other in a while, and I guess you said about the World War II museum and then the reenacting. Like, what else have you been up to?
Boy, so teaching. I started teaching in 2006. That's been kind of a crazy process.
Teaching film?
Yeah, film and video production.
How old are the kids?
College.
Oh, okay.
College age. Yeah.
That seems like it'd be more fun than like middle school age or something. Or
hey,
high school,
I
it seems.
I taught filmmaking to middle school age. It was pretty fun.
Sounds like what Troy's doing would be more fun than what you did.
Yeah, you might get some better. You might get results. So, like, your students might do something that wins an award or something. You know?
Yeah, exactly.
Although
they might actually be dedicated.
I've never had the opportunity to teach at younger grades, but I have seen some pretty amazing, like, high school student films. So every once in a while there are a few out there. Yeah, it was. Yeah. It was a lot of fun. In fact, especially at the school where I was teaching before, it was a very small school. So we had a couple of my students met in film school, and they got engaged, and they just got married a couple of weeks ago. And so I was at the wedding ceremony, and it was a couple of my fellow instructors were there, and then a whole bunch of their sort of cohorts that they had met in film school were there as well. And that was something that I really missed about that particular school, was that we had this kind of little family environment, and a bunch of them have gone on to continue making films. And there was that same group of people just won a bunch of awards at the 48-hour film festival here a couple weeks ago. And so it was really cool to go, oh wow,
those awards.
they actually listened to us.
Get those laurels.
Yeah.
They actually, like, when you saw their work, you were like, yeah, I taught them that, like that.
Kinda, yeah. It was sort of like, oh yeah.
Yeah, you're so proud, like you had something to do with it.
Well, you do it if you're there. Of course, you do. If you're that's like the great joy of teaching, is seeing your students succeed. I'm assuming. Yeah. I don't know. Yeah. I've also only taught middle school, so I don't know.
Well, no, I taught K through 12. I taught animation classes and live action film classes and stop motion to K through 12. So.
All right. Well, yes, and I similarly did like comics and drawing classes to those people.
Yeah. So, there's joy in teaching. But so talk to me about the reenactment, the World War II reenactment.
Sure. So I've always been, I don't know why exactly. I've always been fascinated by World War II, especially from when I was a kid. I just mainly through movies, because I really like World War II movies. And way back in I think it was 1999. I was driving one day. I had the day off, and I saw this sign for a military show. And when I was a kid, I used to collect military stuff all the time, and I hadn't done it for like years. And I'm like, oh wow, that'd be kind of cool to check out now that I'm an adult. And so I stopped there, and I was looking around, and there was a table of these guys dressed in uniforms, and they it was a reenacting group that was recruiting people. And I was like, holy cow, like, you can do that like as an adult? That sounds awesome. And then I went, wait a minute, that would be a really cool way of getting like extras and stuff for a movie. So I said, hey, I'm a filmmaker. Would you mind if I came by and like filmed some of your stuff? And I have since found out that this is how they suck you in. They said, well, yeah, but we're like serious historian people. It's not like paintball. You can't just show up. You have to wear the proper uniform and everything. And I was like, I don't have anything like that. And they're like, oh, don't worry. We'll got enough extra stuff.
Yeah, they'll start you off. Your first fix is free.
Yeah, it's totally an addiction.
Yeah. Your first metal's free, but after that, you got to pay.
Yeah. So I go there. I had a little. I borrowed a little mini DV camera from work, and I go there. They put me in the uniform. I'm like, oh wow, this is pretty cool. And I'll never forget the first battle that I was in. Like this feeling of adrenaline and dread. I'm like, I'm not going to get killed by anyone, but like there's Germans hiding somewhere and I cannot see them. And I do not have a weapon other than this camera. So what am I going to do?
It's the ultimate LARPing experience.
What was that? Was that the Milgram experiments? Are those the right experiments where they had people role play and after a few days they couldn't fit? They went into the roles so
the famous prison guards experience. The prison guards and the prisoners.
That's the Stanford experiment.
Is that the Milgram experiment, though? Is that what that's called? But they have to stop the experiment because the people involved are so immersed in it.
We assume our roles. Like that's the terrible thing, and we do like the group affects us.
I had a little of that on the reenactment field.
Yeah, but not in a negative way.
Yeah,
more so in a like, oh wow, I'm like experiencing this thing, and that made me. And this is part of the reason why I really enjoy reenacting, and it's kind of really what it's supposed to be about. It's not really about adults playing cowboys and Indians, although I can't deny that definitely is a big factor.
It is but it is part of
it. But it's not the factor,
I consider it a plus. Okay.
Yeah.
That you can go out and basically kind of play a little mental trick on yourself that you put yourself in this moment.
It puts you in a mindset. I remember the next battle I did after that was in the wintertime, and there was a German tank that was part of the battle. A little one, but I mean, it's a tank. It's still really big.
That's cool. Yeah, that's better than a little mini tank on your table.
Yeah.
That's a real tank.
And I remember we were hiding along this road, and some guy came running, and they're like, "The tank is around the corner." So we're all trying to hide, and there literally was no place to hide.
And it was driving about. It was happily driving about the tank. Yeah.
I don't know. You guys remember the movie Saving Private Ryan? At the end, they're all hiding in the town, and the tiger tanks are coming. Mm-hmm. And there's a shot where they're in this little crater, and you see a bunch of dirt in the foreground, and the dirt is bouncing around because the tank is vibrating the ground so much. It was exactly like that, and I freaked out.
Wow.
My heart was pounding, and I'm like, I know I can't die, but literally I'm sitting here. I have no place to hide. There's nothing I could do. And I immediately, my mind went back to what was the guy back in 1944 in the Battle of the Bulge thinking that could die?
Yeah.
Like,
I'm sure he was glad his pants were brown.
Yeah, that's a horrible feeling. And it made me be able to appreciate what these people went through.
I'm just like, where?
Kind of situation.
How do you get your hands on a tank?
Here's an interesting.
Fire it up.
Here's an interesting tidbit about the Battle of the Bulge. Both Mel Brooks and Jimmy Doohan fought in the Battle of the Bulge.
That's
Mel
true.
Brooks?
Yeah. And they were in the trenches. And I imagined them together in a trench talking about, when I get back, I'm going to be a star. Me too.
Yeah, Mel Brooks in the trenches. That sounds like a good movie.
Yeah, exactly. But he did. He fought in the Battle of the Bulge.
That's insane.
He was on the ground.
That reminds me of like Fight Club, where he talks about like after Fight Club, the volume on everything gets turned way down. You know, like your film is a success. It's not a success. Who cares? I was in the foxhole 20 years ago.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, it's not quite like that, but you do have that thing, and from that's from a reenactor's experience. I now have that. I have an appreciation for something that I never could have learned from reading a book. From the flip side, from sort of the public standpoint, I think there's something about that three-dimensional interaction with historical items, especially kids. So I ended up learning about combat photographers and learning about the equipment that they had to use and all that kind of stuff, and just knowing the technology that was available. And then you look at the photographs that they were able to capture and go, not only did they have really cumbersome equipment to use, but like people were shooting at them and they still were able to capture these photographs.
Was it Peggy Carter, something Carter? She was a female war photographer in World War II. She was a muse of Picasso. And when they went into Paris and they got the Germans out of Paris, right? Picasso had locked up his studio tight before the Germans came into Paris. And so she had known where the studio was because she was one of his muses. And so took the photos of the studio untouched by the war, you know, when they first went in. Carter, I remember her name was Carter, but I can't remember her first name.
I don't remember Carter. There were several pretty famous female photographers. Lee Miller is probably the most famous.
Miller. I'm sorry, I got it wrong.
Dickie Chappelle was also who actually was. I think she got kicked out of Europe because she kept going to the front lines, which was not allowed.
Not allowed because she was a photographer or because she was a woman?
I think she was a civilian photographer, number one, but mainly because she was a woman. Yeah.
Yes.
And,
no, Lee Miller. That's who I was thinking of, not Carter. Sorry.
Yeah. And then Dickie went on, and she was a war correspondent, a photographer in Korea and Vietnam. In fact, she was killed in Vietnam while on assignment. So, some really amazing stories there. But the other thing I was getting at was that there's something about that tactile response that resonates with people that allows them to make connections that you can't really get from looking at a photograph or a book. And it is especially the case with when you run into veterans, especially when you're talking about something as traumatic as like war. I remember I was privileged enough to be part of a Pearl Harbor reenactment in New Orleans in 2001 when they opened up part of what's now called the World War II Museum.
Sorry, I have to have a chuckle at the idea of the Pearl Harbor reenactment in New Orleans, but
it is weird. No, it's a little weird.
I get it, but it makes me laugh.
Yeah, I don't know why they just decided to put that museum there. So
it's like keeping China British.
Yeah, exactly. They had airplanes. They had Hollywood style pyrotechnics. It was really intense. But they had like a crowd that was there, and they had brought several Pearl Harbor survivors to this thing. And I remember that evening after the reenactment, we were watching the news reports, and they interviewed a family. So it was a guy who was not just a Pearl Harbor survivor, but a USS Arizona survivor, and his son, and then his grandkids were all there. So three generations of people. This was, I think, the 60th anniversary of Pearl Harbor. And so this reenactment was maybe 15 minutes long, maybe 10 minutes long. And he said for the first time in 60 years, he had some kind of frame of reference to be able to have a conversation with his family about what he experienced on that day. Like, he was able to go, okay, that thing that you just saw today, take that and multiply it by 1,000,000 times. That's
yes.
Whereas prior to that moment, he could not talk about it at all for 60 years because he just had no way of giving them some touchstone to be able to open up and go, this is what it was like. And, that was one guy out of the millions of people that were part of that. So that was something that really stuck with me. That same event, this destroys me every time, so I apologize. It's tough for me to get through this story. That same event, when I was done, I was wearing a particular uniform that I think it was the only guy that was wearing this. It was a Navy uniform. I was walking back to where our camp was, and there was sort of a snow fence that they had put up as a barrier between the battlefield and and where the spectators were. And I caught someone out of the corner of my eye as I was walking back, and I look over, and it was just this ancient man, extremely, extremely frail, holding this gigantic picture that was, I don't know, it had to have been at least 2.5 feet by 1.5 feet tall, in this huge wooden frame. It probably weighed more than this poor man did. He's trying to hold this giant painting up on top of this fence, and he has like no teeth. And so I can't really understand any things he's saying. He's trying to get my attention. He's pointing at me, and then he's pointing at the picture. And so I walk over, and he's pointing at my uniform and pointing at the picture. And I see that it's a picture of a Navy ship. So I'm like, oh, okay, I'm in the Navy. It's a Navy ship. Got it. And then way down in the bottom of the frame, there's a little photograph, like a boot camp photograph, a portrait of a sailor. In his dress uniform, and he points at the sailor's picture, and he points at himself, and then he points at my uniform, and this is where I lose it. He goes, it's the only thing I could understand that he said. He said, "Thank you," and
wow.
I almost lost it. I said, "No, sir, thank you," and that was all he wanted. He just wanted the acknowledgement that you are representing me today, and I was there. And then he took this giant thing and then hobbled off into the crowd and just vanished like some kind of weird specter from the past. It was the most amazing, soul-crushing, humbling moment I've ever had. And I was like, anybody that asks me why the hell do I reenact that right there, that moment?
Yeah,
you
explained that. yes, you made that very clear. That's very interesting. Yes. I did a little bit of reenacting in England. Like they had. In the early 90s, they had some government arts money, and I lived near this. It was a place called Basing House outside of Basingstoke, and Basingstoke's called Basingstoke. That was a Viking name for the place, because it was near Basing. That was Basingstoke, where they kept their stock. And Basing had been, I think it was like an Iron Age hill fort, and then. By the time of the English Civil War, it had grown into like really the finest house in all the country. It was a big, nice house, and it was sort of very well reputed, and it held out through this English Civil War, through various sort of battles until towards the end when Cromwell came along with his cannon and just blew the shit out of it, and the stones all used in the buildings around. And now it's just more or less an earthwork again, but there's a sort of later house that's sort of built up there too. But you can go in, and the English reenactors come, the sealed knot, and they regularly, very much the same way as the Civil War reenactors go here. They reenact those English Civil War battles, with the long pike staffs and stuff. They do, it's a very funny thing they do. Where they like you see pictures of them, they've got like all their pikes all together in this sort of big scrum, and they did a sort of broadening thing where we did this whole event where they did a sealed knot reenactment of a battle, but then they had this sort of whole fair going on around it, kind of like a Renaissance fair and stuff like that. And I was in my early 20s and sort of enrolled in like these. Like my friend got me into it, and he said, "Come on, we should do this." And we signed up, and
that's how else they get you, as friends do.
Yeah, well, I'm very easily susceptible to these things, but yeah, it sounded like he'd heard about it. It sounded like a good idea, and we went along. We signed up for all these kind of workshops, and like we did sort of circus workshops, and then he and I sort of did like a role playing thing where we ended up being like these sort of bandits in the crowd, like where I would sort of come up and coming up to people in the crowd. We had a script and everything we were going on, but. When the event was going on, it went on over like 2 or 3 nights, I think, and we were sort of going through the crowd, sort of fleecing the crowd, and it was very real, and people were very freaked out. It was a bit weird. It was a bit like I had sort of permission to be a criminal for the night. It was a very odd thing, but you got like that whole night, the whole event was just very, really sort of took you back, but and it was a lot of fun, and I guess it's different with the World War II. Those people are still alive. Some of them, and and so it touches them, more directly. But so it's interesting to sort of make that connection, I suppose, for people that it's the same for those people in the past. You're honouring them.
It keeps the moment alive for people now, because you're right. Like experiential memory is much stronger than something you're going to read in a book or hear about. And I remember, just the sounds of cannons. Right? They do reenactments all the time for the Revolutionary War up in the Boston area. And they're very much about America. And, we fought for freedom here. And you can find a lot of little spots up there where they do reenactment. And what I remember most was the sound of the cannons, watching those. And it's in that it sticks with you because of that sound. Yeah.
Yeah.
Reminds me of Ken Burns. He made that documentary on World War II, or that series. And I think it was in an interview where he said, these people we're only going to be able to interview him for so much longer. We got to get this. We got to get this documented because this generation's going away. I think that was World War II. Does that make sense? That's, but it would have been
the same statement. The same statement was made about the comics industry. It said, if you want to know these stories, ask now because you're not going to get a chance later. I forget who said that about the comics industry, but that's one of the reasons why there's been so much emphasis lately on trying to capture the history of comics. And there's been a lot of books coming out and stuff about that. But okay, so
so World War II. Yeah, and collecting. I knew a kid growing up who was very into sort of like going to the army surplus and collecting all that sort of stuff. So is that what you like? How you sort of started out?
That's kind of how I did it. Although I didn't know what was what back then, and now I feel really bad because I'm like, oh, I totally had one of those when I was a kid, and then like my parents sold it, and then now it's worth like thousands of dollars or something.
I'll be right back. I just want to grab something that's relevant to this.
Sure. But yeah, that's kind of what what I would do. Go to, surplus stores or, find stuff at antique stores, things like that. I just would collect stuff. Now, thankfully, I know what it actually is. So I'm like, oh yeah, one of those.
So, Troy, I own a real samurai sword from the Japanese Navy.
Oh wow!
That has the flower on it. They used to rub off the flower, but this one still has the flower on it. And it was taken out of the back of a Japanese officer who's dead on an island.
Holy cow!
And his own men had turned on him. And
the
story. That is the story that was given to me. And so the scabbard loop is cut off of the scabbard, because that's how he got it off the body. And then he took the sword out, cleaned the blade, and put it in the scabbard and took it home.
Wow.
So can I just, sorry to interrupt here, but back in the 90s in Tucson, I went to an Army Navy surplus store. Sorry, this is all glitching out. And I think these are World War II combat boots. There's a Social Security and a name in there.
Oh, wow. And I can't really see them, but
these things have held up like incredibly. I have to get them like near my face. This is all like
they keep disappearing. It's like the antiques.
This is like steel. These are like steel. I don't know what to call them. And the soles I've had these forever. They're like indestructible. I love them.
Wait, hang on, because I'm putting you in the big.
I guess what I could do is I could look up the Soch, and maybe at one point I did, to find out like because Social Security numbers don't they tell. A part of it is where you were born, and then part of it is maybe the year, or not.
Possibly, yeah. It depends on if it's a social, or it could be just the serial number for when they were in the military.
It could, and
but you might be able to find out. There was actually a big. So a lot of the military records were held at a particular facility. I think somewhere in.
There's a big fire.
Was it Jefferson?
I don't.
City.
I don't
Missouri?
remember exactly where, but I know it affected my grandfather's records.
Yeah, a huge part of World War II records were lost. But you can still find a lot of information because some of that stuff was kept in different facilities. So you might be able to find something. I'm trying to remember if there's like like the DoD website or something has a link that you can use. I don't remember off the top of my head. That's what's cool. I have a friend of mine who's also a reenactor, but he has a business in that he just finds he looks for really specific kinds of things that have that sort of story that's around them. So he usually wants stuff that is in a collection. So like the grandfather or great grandfather has passed away, and he had this steamer trunk that he hasn't opened in decades. And they open it up and it's like this little mini time capsule from that time period. So he collects a lot of that stuff, but usually it has, it's very clearly marked with the name of the person. He's even done things where like he's gone to like antique stores or garage sales or even on eBay and stuff where he'll find people that are selling medals that clearly were issued to someone. He will look up the information and he will return the medal back to the family.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, it's really cool.
That's a good film idea.
It's like it. I don't know. I've always believed that there's nothing more interesting than what really happened. And when people who say that history is boring, it's because they've only been fed dates and the stories of generals and kings, right? They haven't been sold the stories of the average person who, wrote their issue number in their boots to make sure that if their boots were the only thing that survived, they could, be buried.
I have huge issues with the way history was taught to me and probably taught to millions of kids. And it is just a series of names, dates, and places. And it makes it so boring. And they don't even teach you the lessons of history. History has lessons.
That's the whole point, right?
Yeah.
So World War II, is that your favorite? Is that your favorite period?
It's probably the one that I have done the most research on. Oddly enough, most recently, as I've been getting older, I've been involved in World War II reenacting for like 5 times longer than the war actually lasted. But somehow I got turned onto Old West reenacting, and before war movies caught my interest, cowboy movies were sort of my first movie love. And so that is
Wild
definitely...
West only existed for 30 years.
I thought it was 10.
I consider it just prior to the Civil War to about 1900, because 1900 was when electricity entered the West, and I consider that the death of the Wild West. But that's just my personal.
I don't know, but I've heard from people that actually the cowboy era, the Wild Wild West, lawless West was a very brief period of history, but I don't know for sure.
It kind of depends on your definition and where. Like I think as as states started becoming states, it kind of depended on where you were.
I heard once it was like basically just a 10-year period of history, really, until the railroads were sort of connected across, and then it sort of moves to another phase.
Yeah, so you say the railroad?
Yeah, well, but the
railroad is part of the Wild West.
Yeah, but then it connects. At some point, it connects. The railroad coming through is like all those movies. It's always about the railroads coming through, right? But that's only a sort of short period of time where it's coming through, and then it's through.
For you, the Wild West is the Oregon Trail period. When people were going along the Oregon Trail before there was the
before there was the
railroad.
Yeah.
Okay, this is why I love debates about history, because when is the Wild West is still debated today, because people are like, oh no, it was this time, and oh no, this ended the Wild West.
Yeah, but you can say yes, it never ended, but all right.
Look at it this way. Okay, the Man
but
with
most
No
of the
Name
movies
series,
are in a fairly small period of time.
The Man with No Name series, the last one, which happens before the first movie, happens during the Civil War. And so that means that everything that happens in those movies is within that 10-year period after the Civil War. And so that's definitely the Wild West. But when did it start? When did it end?
And that's when the Searchers, I think, happened. John Ford's The Searchers, isn't that? That's after the Civil War. There's a period of wildness, and that main character, that John Wayne character, is having a hard time. He's like a war type character, and he has a hard time going back into civilization. At the end of the film, he walks off into the West. This untamed man who can't fit, in.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He's doomed because it's all going to be, condos in a few decades.
Yeah.
So where is he going to live?
Yeah, I mean, he was great
at the house.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Exactly. Literally. Yeah. He.
Speaking of time periods, I don't want to.
Tangents are good.
I'm going to jump back to World War II. The thing that fascinates me about World War II is that, at least in America, obviously in Europe, this was very different in as well as Asia. But in World War II in America, it was 4 years, which is like, I don't know how many decimal points in terms of time, cosmic time. 4 years that our country was almost completely on the same page. It was never like that before, and it's never.
Well, that's
like
interesting.
That
it wasn't. Yeah, it wasn't before, because I was looking at I saw some Dr. Seuss cartoons that they had on display at the museum down at UC San Diego. I was there, and they were showing his, anti-America First cartoons that he was doing back then, which was very interesting to see.
It is extreme, and people always think like, oh, it's the good old days when we all used to get along. No, not really.
No,
4 years. That was it.
Yeah.
So
4 years.
Killing Nazis really unifies people. It turns out.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a lot easier to say that my neighbor's not bad if the guy across the street's doing way worse.
The trouble is, a lot of the Nazis tend to come over here.
Well, and the other thing that was different in that war is
when they get defeated elsewhere or whatever. If they can't come here, they go down South America. I hate to say it. I mean, that's strong. We got to look out for those Nazis wherever they are.
Look out for those Nazis. But that war was a little different because there were like victory gardens and rationing, and everybody was touched by it. And the modern wars are very kind of insulated. It seems like there's a small group of people that suffer, and really the general population isn't asked to make any sacrifices, or no victory gardens or butter rationing or stuff like that.
Exactly. Yeah. People
victory gardens. Now HOAs would be against that. They would be like, "What? You're growing food? What's wrong with you?" No, that's against our rules.
It's
useless
crazy.
lawns only.
Like urban gardens have come back in the last, I'd say, 20 years. Like places like Detroit that look like they've been through a war are growing gardens again.
Gardens, and the thing I've noticed is really popular, at least around here, people having chickens in their backyard, like urban settings.
Oh yeah, I was quite tempted
have some chickens
with that.
in my neighborhood. In my neighborhood, and I'm in central San Francisco. I'm in Bernal Heights, and somebody has a chicken here. I don't know if they're supposed to, but they've had it for years.
I think you can have a chicken. I don't think there's anything. People get upset if you have a rooster, though.
Yeah, that would be. That's going to be pretty obnoxious.
That'd be quite funny around here.
In San Francisco?
I mean, chickens are pretty easy, is my understanding.
It's totally off grid. It's a green alarm clock.
Hey, it is, yeah.
My friend lived out in the country, and he had one that it made a noise. They called it 50 pence because it sort of went 50 pence.
That rooster could be famous.
Put that on the internet these days.
On YouTube. Hey, Troy, I was wondering, was there anything you learned about World War II that surprised you? Because I remember when I learned that, Russia suffered as badly as it did, and it was occupied as widely, and that, it actually was like kind of what won the war. Like that was an epiphany for me. I wasn't taught that in school. Was there anything that surprised you?
I'm trying to probably the most surprising thing was learning about the photographers and the kind of equipment that they used. Like at least early in the war, they didn't have it's interesting. The Germans had all of the most advanced lens technology. So to make up for the fact that the Americans didn't have good lens technology, they just made the negative gigantic. So they were shooting on these 4x5 cameras, which are huge. They're really heavy and bulky. And at least early in the war, you could only put 2 pieces of film in the camera at one time. It's a big piece of a rectangle that has a piece of film on each side, and you would have to put it in, take the picture, take it out, flip it upside down, put it in. All while people are shooting at you, and you can't. They didn't have through the lens focusing, so you had to understand how photography works, understand how depth of field works, and just hope to God that you were within that range.
So you're not previewing what you're shooting like a modern camera where you see you're focused.
Exactly. And then having to do that all on the fly.
Yeah, I know John Ford got PTSD from that.
Oh yeah,
having to film
he was wounded on during the Battle of Midway.
Have you ever read The Name Above the Title by Frank Capra, his autobiography, where he, he invents everything and he's the best and the most wonderful director in the world and everyone should love him? He talks about the Why We Fight series, and he talks in great detail about the cameras used and how they got smaller and smaller and smaller as the war went on, because the cameramen were complaining that they were being shot at, not because the technology advance. It forced the technology to advance because of their complaints.
This probably has changed since I started, but when I started reenacting back in 1999, at that time, this was one of the surprising facts that I learned. World War II was still the most photographed war in history. Mm-hmm. It's probably different now, with the advent of the internet and everything, but that blew me away, that like they realized the power of photography and cinematography, and they just threw on all sides of the war, they just threw tons and tons and tons of resources. The military had contractors that were making cameras for the military, but they went through stuff so quickly, they just literally would send people to local camera stores and they would just buy out.
Sorry.
Whoa, some tuners.
No, I live on a busy street, and that was somebody doing a wheelie down the street on a motorcycle.
I mean,
it's
exciting. It was very dramatic.
It's interesting because, like, I think of Vietnam as the war where they said, "Oh, we got to get those cameras off of the war. We can't show those bodies coming home. We have to." And I don't know if there was censorship, but I think that there was the awareness that it was very bad for the war effort to document everything. In World War II, they were like, "This is new technology. Let's shoot everything. No problems here."
There's a World War. Oh, sorry. Yeah, I was going to say there's a World War II movie that I really like called The Canterbury Tale. Have you ever seen that? It's made during World War II by Powell and Pressburger, who became sort of famous for. Well, I guess probably they're most famous. They did A Thief of Baghdad version. I guess in the 50s it was a.
I'm a big fan of The Longest Day. It's classic.
Yes, and The Longest Day, but the thing about the Canterbury Tale is it's made like right during World War II, right before D-Day, and they're making it in Canterbury. And the star of the story is an American GI who they recruited, who was actually a GI, a fairly ordinary bloke, and he's sort of, from a farm in Oregon, and he's sort of gone to visit Canterbury, and he gets off the train at the stop before at night, and, he sort of ends up in this weird little village, and it's a bit of a sort of Why We Fight, like sort of propagandary, but it's quite sort of mystical, and it talks a lot about, the sort of pilgrims and the old pilgrim road and this loss, and he meets a woman who's sort of serving in the women's auxiliary services and all that, and, you find out she's got a boyfriend or fiance who's sort of missing in action. There's a weird character who's sort of going around putting glue in women's hair, and they're trying to find this glue man. So then some quite weird sort of quirky things, and they're cinematic. They really sort of love. There's a sort of, there's a scene where there's a sort of projection room, and he's sort of talking about the history of the area. So it's like the sort of film within a film, and all these, they're really, very interesting filmmakers. And it's a very interesting sort of whimsical film, and it ends, and then they get into Canterbury, and then you see all the bits of Canterbury that have been bombed out around the cathedral, so you're like, oh wow, they're really right here making it now, and then the sort of soldiers are going for a service right before they go off into D-Day, and so it's being made sort of on the fly in the middle of all this sort of thing as a kind of thing, and there's a British version and an American version. In the American version, the actor, he has a girlfriend that's played by Kim Hunter. As Amber will know, who played opposite Dr. Zaius.
Yes.
I
almost had her head, but no, I have the head of Dr. Zaius instead.
Dr. Zaius. So I don't know, but I love that one.
You've never seen the head of Dr. Zaius? Oh, I gotta grab it. Okay.
Oh yes. Where you go grab it? Yes. And. Yeah, I don't know. So that one I particularly like, but I'm quite a fan of World War II movies in general as well. I mean, I sort of grew up with them. In Britain we were, encouraged to hate the Nazis and support the good British boys who went out there and did a good job for us. Which in the 70s, it was only sort of 30 years later, really, I suppose. Yes.
Yeah. My first World War II movie is actually, I think it was technically, there was a lot of Hollywood money behind it, but it was made by a British director whose name, sadly, I cannot remember, but The Guns of Navarone.
Oh, yes.
Which is based on a book by a British author, too. Right?
Oh, yes. Is it Alistair MacLean?
Yeah.
Yes. He's pretty good read. He writes all sorts of good, I call them like boys' own adventures, you know.
Yeah. Definitely very cool. Where did you get that?
John Chambers was a good friend of my dad, and when he died, he bequeathed this to my dad.
Oh, wow.
And when my dad died, he bequeathed it to me.
That is really awesome.
And so what this is the makeup test that they presented to the producers to sell the movie to the money people to make Planet of the Apes. And so this was one of his first tests, and it's the head of Dr. Zaius. And I learned from an expert of the film that this mold was actually used for another character later on. And so he's never actually seen this mold with blonde hair.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and he was like, "Oh my gosh, that's amazing." It's like, yeah, I know.
That's more convincing than the actual Dr. Zaius.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I own the head of Dr. Zaius.
Well, he's an ambiguous character, Dr. Zaius. I can never quite. He's a little unclear.
Isn't he the keeper of the? He's kind of like the like maybe the church would have been in the Middle Ages.
Dr. Zaius is studying the humans.
Yeah, he knows that whatever the humans found was a bad thing. So,
Dr. Zaius had been to the Forbidden Zone. So
he's been to the Forbidden Zone. He knows the history, he knows the truth, and he's covering it up.
Yes, be in charge of the planet because he's seen the Statue of Liberty and stuff.
He's
and
a
probably
priest
other buildings.
Yeah, right.
Because he says you won't like what you'll find.
Dangerous information. Yes. Yeah. I'm saying what I'm saying, but good job.
Yeah, that's good. I remember that. I remember the first time.
We're all saying the same thing.
The little doll.
Yeah. And so he was the authority of the day. Of Planet of the Apes. But yes, just because we were talking movies and everything like that, and so I had any opportunity I have to show the head of Dr. Zaius, I will, until I have an opportunity to put it under glass.
Yes. They should do Planet of the Apes in World War II. That would be good. They didn't do that one yet.
That would be interesting, yeah.
No, but
so we mean to ask guys, like your World War II movies, are they sort of more serious World War II movies, or are they like, World War II versus, are you making all those World War II versus Nazis or versus zombies? there's quite a lot. I see a lot of World War II horror movies lately.
They aren't cross genre. Although this new one, first of all, I'm not that involved with the story development on these. That's mostly Luke's domain, but they are mostly serious. They're not serious in the sense of like Schindler's List serious, but they're more kind of like if you were to take like a 80s action film and then put it in.
Yeah. Well, we had like Commando comics were very popular, like again in the 70s. Like they were like little square books, sort of 6 inches by 6 inches, and they'd have a comic story of some World War II action. It would be like Spitfire, like whatever. There were endless amounts of them. I got a big stack of them at a fair one time.
Like a Sergeant Rock kind of a thing. They're very definitely, more about the fun of just having action and stuff like that.
Yes. So you get the costumes and the tanks and the.
Yeah, this one that we're doing now, though, he decided, partly because of the weird stuff that was going on with the financing and the strike and everything, he went, oh, maybe I just really need to rethink this, rather than just doing a straight sort of war movie genre. So he's basically applying sort of a spaghetti western style to a World War II movie, and it's about all of his other films have been kind of either American or German based, but this one was actually based on a true story that took place in the Ukraine during the war, because Ukraine was obviously part of the Soviet Union then. And there was a really interesting thing that happened. That there's I'm really terrible with my European geography, but there's a town called Kursk that is either in Russia or it's near the border of Russia and the Ukraine, or it's in Ukraine. I don't remember. I should know this. Anyway, it was in Ukrainian territory at the time during World War II, and the Ukrainians had their own standing army that was sort of part of the Red Army, but not really. They were kind of separated in a weird way, but they were supported obviously by the Russian army. And apparently this town was strategically important to the Germans, and the Germans were preparing to take it over. And the story goes that when the Russians found out that the Germans were coming, they're like, I'm not going to get attacked by the Germans. We're out of here. And they left all of the Ukrainians to fend for themselves. And it was a really small group of people that had to defend themselves. And they eventually had a different group of Russians that realized, oh, we probably shouldn't abandon these guys. We'll come back and help them. But so it's kind of about that weird exchange that happened.
Yeah, that's interesting because yes, there's a lot of complexity around that, because I know, like, I have a Russian friend here, and she was. So, I mean, I was a bit surprised, but I mean, because she's not like pro Putin or anything, but she was like, oh, there, early on she was like, there are like a lot of Nazis in Ukraine, and like I guess she was sort of getting that as a thing because she's sort of more of a Jewish background, but I mean, Zelensky, I think is Jewish. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think part
of but there is some complexity there between like all these different factions.
Yeah, there's some truth to that to a certain extent, but I think it's been exaggerated.
Yeah, like Putin sort of used it as one of his excuses. For sure.
I mean, anywhere that the Germans went, they conscripted people to be on their side. So you could say that about France. You could say that about
England. They were like a lot of people were quite pro Hitler.
Well, I mean,
Chuck's invasion.
Chuck's talking about the recent report. You're talking about the recent stuff about Nazis in Eastern.
Well,
Ukraine.
it sort of went back. It's just I don't know. Whatever. This was sort of in the early days. I think she's sort of come around a bit on that now. But I don't know whatever she's hearing. Yeah.
Well, who was it that said the first casualty of war is the truth? I mean, we're living we're having a proxy war with Russia, so we're not getting the truth in this country, and neither are Russians or Ukrainians. So
no, you have to kind of listen to both, and listen to the Ukrainians, and listen to the BBC, and listen to everybody, and kind of draw your own conclusions.
Yeah.
Okay. Who took out the dam? Was it the Ukrainians? I don't think so.
I was just going to say, Troy, about that storyline you were just describing. I didn't know this, but Ukraine is kind of the gateway to invading Russia. And I don't know if the terrain is better for invading Russia that way, or the weather is milder. But historically, Russia's been invaded. Well, definitely during World War II, but there's been other periods of time where that's where the invasion comes from. It comes through Ukraine.
Yep.
Geography, there's mountains too that prevent it too. So
like up north of Ukraine. Like, well, I don't know what makes Ukraine so great for invading Russia, but apparently it is.
North is Ukraine is south, and so it does have better weather. And the further you go up in Russia, the worse the ground is. Right, and you start getting into permafrost, and Russia has like a mud season where you can't drive across it, you can't walk across it at all. Like,
how do you know
Troy, help me out here.
Am
I wrong?
I'm campaign there. So.
Don't know anything about that.
We have a spring in this country. In Russia, it's mud season.
It's a mud season. I don't know how to describe it, but yes, during their spring, when all the snow is melting and they have spring rains and stuff like that, there's huge swaths of Russian permafrost you can't cross.
Well, I hope you're listening, guests. That's quite important. I know Vladimir Putin listened to the show, so.
Oh yes. We're very big with world leaders.
Troy, how are you doing? How are you doing for time? I mean, we've been going like an hour and 50 minutes. I mean, we're quite loose. Sometimes guests, want to go after an hour. Other times they want to sort of hang around.
This
and
is
chat
where we
get.
No,
I'm fine.
Okay, good. Yeah.
With coffee and.
So, yes, just say I got to go. If you got to
go. Speaking of, I mean, I'm sure there are a resurgence of fascism in Ukraine just as much as there is everywhere else in the world. Unfortunately, our country included. There's a few years ago, there's a documentary that came out, a mockumentary. on Netflix called Look Who's Back.
I was just about to mention that movie. I saw it. Yeah, it's fantastic. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, tell us about that. Yeah.
Is it about?
I don't know about it.
So it's
Look
the premise of the movie is that the main character of the movie is an independent producer that works for a television station, and the television station wants to terminate his contract unless he comes up with a good story. He can't find one. And then magically, they don't give you any explanation for this. Hitler pops up in the remains of the bunker in modern day Berlin.
Yeah, maybe he had some sort of time travel experiment. They don't explain it. He wakes up and he's sort of lying there and he's in like a council estate or something.
He's still wearing his chancellor uniform and everything, and he's
I didn't realize he was still alive.
What's going on?
Yeah,
he's still alive.
Yeah. He sort of popped through time. Here I am.
Okay.
Yeah, he's popped through time, and he just happens to run into this documentary producer in the street because he's walking around trying to figure out what's going on. And the guy assumes that he's just a crazy person that actually thinks that he's Hitler. He doesn't realize that he really is Hitler.
Yeah, and you don't really know as an audience either. But it's very comical. It's very comical early on.
It's played off as comedy, and it is very funny. But also there are moments that are quite disturbing because Hitler starts to realize, oh, this guy works for television. We didn't really have television back then. What a perfect way to control the masses. So he basically is gradually manipulating this guy.
Yes, they go on the road. They go on the road. It's sort of
like they take him to Bavaria and all these sort of famous sort of Nazi origin places.
This sounds like springtime for Hitler.
It's
it's more thoughtful really, because they go on the road, they go and they talk to people in pubs and bars and things, and they get there and they're like, oh yeah, and they start going on like they would here or anywhere in Britain, anywhere, like start with their right wing views, and you're like, oh, that's when the movie starts to take a darker tone. Up to now we've been sort of laughing along at Hitler. Now all of a sudden Hitler is sort of like you realizing he's starting to manipulate the film producer, and he's realizing that the people still like his views, and then the film gets progressively darker as basically Hitler comes back to power again.
And it's interesting because it's another populist swell. It's another nationalist swell that's going on, and he returns for that.
Most of it obviously is made up, but I think the parts where they go back to Bavaria, where they're actually meeting with real people, real. I think that's real. Yeah, and they're playing it off. It's almost like a Borat kind of a thing.
Yeah, they're doing a sort of Borat thing. Yeah.
And these people were like, I remember one of the things, the guy comes up to him and he hugs Hitler and he goes, we miss you.
And it's I know, and you're laughing pretty hard, but that's really where the movie's starting to turn. And you're like, going, that guy means that.
Exactly. That is
so. This is in Germany, huh?
This was in Germany.
So it's like that scene with Borat where he's at that rodeo. Yeah, and that old timers telling him like, we don't like, gays around here, or whatever that candid line is in the movie. Interesting.
It was...
they pick some bits, whatever, to make the point. And then there's another funny bit in it later where that movie Downfall and the clip where they would have Hitler ranting in the bunker. They do a funny thing where it's like the TV studio executive is doing the rant, and like he, all the people around him. So rather than Hitler doing the rant, the studio executive is doing the rant.
Exactly. Yeah.
That sounds like a good film. You know what I find interesting about that? It's like if Hitler does come back, he won't look anything like Hitler, is what I think. Yeah, it will be cloaked in this way where people won't even recognize it. It'll be different methods but the same ends. Yeah. Because I don't think you can come back as Hitler. The world is too braced for that. It'll come back through some back door. Can you
imagine what the world would be like if like the Vienna School of Art had just accepted him?
Yeah, I've thought about that. Like, what if he wasn't a failed artist? What if he got some fame?
I wouldn't ever collect his work, and it's pretty jarring and uncomfortable when people do collect his work. There's some right wing people here in the United States who collect Hitler art, right?
I only collect the things before he started.
But I've seen it in history books and stuff, and I mean, he wasn't bad as an artist,
You gotta separate the artist from the dictator from the.
Yeah, exactly. This reminds me of another a short film. This is a pretty old film, and I can never remember the name of it. I think you can still find it out there. It was made by an Italian filmmaker. I saw it and I was totally blown away. It's only just a few minutes long. It takes place during World War I. It follows a British soldier who is they're doing a charge going across no man's land, and the guy gets separated from his unit, and he's basically jumping from one bomb crater to another trying to survive. He ends up getting hit by a bomb, and he falls into the middle of this crater, and he looks over on the other end of this big crater is a German soldier. And there's sort of this struggle, like his gun doesn't work, that guy's gun doesn't work. And he finally gets a gun that works, and he goes to shoot the guy. And he doesn't. He chooses not to shoot the guy. He lowers his weapon, and they kind of just have this little exchange, and the German sort of crawls off, and he goes off and joins his land. And then it fades to black, and then they bring up a title card that says, the German soldier was Corporal Adolf Hitler. Apparently a true story. It's like, holy shit, that guy could have solved so many problems. Maybe I don't know.
This was maybe a real thing.
It's a real story. Yeah.
So you're saying like some guy spared Hitler's life in World War I, and
yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
There was a good.
I was going to say
his mother was Jewish. I don't get the hate against Jews because his mother was Jewish.
I mean, he obviously had a mommy problem.
But do you get crazy though?
I get crazy. Yeah, I get the manipulation of people and using their hate against people and stuff like that. But it's like it's got to be a self-loathing because he himself had Jewish blood.
I can see a funny short film being made where, Hitler does get accepted into art school. He's a like somewhat famous artist, never goes into politics or anything like that. He's not totally happy, but then, he dies an old man and World War II doesn't happen. And this can be an ad for why people should support the arts. At the end of it, it's be like, support the arts.
Support the arts or we'll go Hitler on your ass. Yeah. I don't think that's not the message that the arts is trying to put forward.
No, but I think it'd be hilarious. It would be a hilarious short film, Like people would be like, where is this going? And then at the end it'd just be like, that's why you should support the arts.
Please support not great artists.
Not great artists. So that they don't become
support your
dictators.
mediocre artists.
Please support
that's a
mentally unstable, mediocre artists.
Please help us prevent the next Holocaust.
Yeah.
Keep mentally ill people out of politics.
Prevent Holocaust.
Well, Chris has got some lyrics about that in his song, like Raw Dog. They call him Mead Chris. You go on about not being big or little and being somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, finding the middle way. Well, I noticed in hip hop there's a lot of Lils, right? There's a lot of Lil people, Lil Waynes, Lil Uzi, there's a whole bunch of them. And there's all these big ones too, like Big Daddy Kane and Big this and that. And I was like, what about Meads?
Yeah.
Like, I'm going to find my own lane here, and it's going to be Meads.
Exactly.
And that's my lane. I'm a middle-sized white dude. Mead Chris.
That's just what the world needs more of.
Nobody is in that lane.
Mid Chris.
Nobody's in. Well, Chuck suggested Mean Chris, like the average MEAN, but
then it's a bit ambiguous. But I like the double meanings. But yeah,
right. Then it might just seem like I'm a cruel person.
Yeah. Mead. No, that's good. I get it. Like Biggie or Little or Meaty.
No rappers are in that lane, y'all. It's all mine.
Yeah.
All mine.
What about Mead? I guess Mead. Yeah, sounds good. Yeah.
Oddly enough, that's a weird. It's a weird analogy to politically what's wrong with the world. Like everyone is stuck on these extremes. In the middle is just. It's crazy to me that like when you talk about being in the middle, which I tend to fall kind of in the middle, but yet I have friends that like talk about the middle as though we were the Antichrist, and I'm like,
people get
how we got along for like thousands of years. What do you mean? When did it become bad to be in the middle?
A person is reasonable, right?
But
as a group, people aren't reasonable.
No.
This is really interesting to me, and what I've noticed, and somebody recently, I can't remember who it was, if it was Elon Musk or Jordan Peterson or Kennedy, said what I've been saying for a long time. I'm sure a lot of people have thought this. The media coverage makes it look like these very small minorities on either side are representative of the whole group.
Yeah.
So you get these very extreme left stories and right stories. And if you don't talk to these people or know enough of them, you just think it's representative of the whole group.
Yeah, but if you make a news show that's all about the medium, nobody watches it.
Yeah, but the vast
majority that's right.
of people there. I have a theory about why that is. And I blame two things. Well, a couple of things, and I don't know enough.
Ooh, the ranty part of the show.
Yeah, it was my theory. The theory that is mine.
We like theories.
So, first of all, was the introduction of the 24-hour news cycle. And now, and then somewhere around that time, and your audience hopefully can correct my facts here, but around that,
you have that person up.
We have 2 people watching.
2 people up there. Start Googling because you're going to have to fact check me on this.
Yeah.
I believe around that same time. In fact, I think maybe some of these regulatory changes allowed 24-hour news to exist, but I could be wrong. Is that during the Reagan administration, there were a lot of changes at the Federal Communications Commission that changed the requirements to be able to get a broadcasting license. One of them was that that you no longer had to do what they called in the public interest broadcasting. And along with that, also there was a change, I believe, and again, I could be wrong. Prior to that, a broadcasting corporation had to fiscally and financially divide the difference between their news division and their entertainment division.
Yes.
And something got changed that allowed them to be commingled.
Yeah.
Along with the introduction of the 24-hour news cycle. So now, not only did they have to fill 24 hours worth of news, but they were dependent
They could fill it with whatever they wanted.
Well, but they were also dependent on the commercial revenue that was coming in the same way that, All in the Family would have to be dependent on commercial revenue.
And then, without the guardrails, it becomes a race to the bottom.
Yeah, and as a result of that, also the introduction of the commentator as opposed to a journalist came about as being to fill all of that time. It's like, well, we have to have someone that can talk for a really long time, and we don't want to spend the money to go out and fact check all this stuff and do the normal journalistic due diligence. So let's just have someone pontificate on their own opinions. But that has changed to the point that people think that someone talking about their opinion, it's actually news, but it's not. It's just a guy talking about whatever. And I can make up whatever I want and just make up crazy shit, and suddenly my ratings go up.
And when they do cover news,
don't realize that
it's like this much of a news item, and then the rest of it is their opinion.
But
yes. We only see the tips of the icebergs.
Yeah. There's no edifice that explains that to the viewer, right? As far as they know, television has never changed since it got invented in the late 40s. Yeah. And so it wasn't like, okay, today we're going to start doing this. And by the way, this guy's just talking shit. He doesn't really know what the fuck he's talking about. Sorry, can I swear?
Well, that's right. Yeah,
okay, good.
Yeah. We prefer not to go like full OnlyFans, but
sure. But
I think that's something a little different.
Depends on the game.
Yeah, definitely. Anyway,
Amber's going to get us there.
That'd get us viewers, certainly. Yeah.
You can trace this back to basically the invention of CNN. And everything that kind of came after that. And then once the internet showed up, then it was like, to me, the internet is like giving a gun to a monkey. It's like we as a species cannot process that much information. It's impossible for us to know what to do with it. And
or a samurai sword.
Yeah.
Samurai sword to Dr. Zayas.
I heard an interview with a guy.
I could do that if I wanted, but I won't.
I heard an interview with a guy a number of years ago.
Did you want to see the samurai sword too? I can pull it out.
Well, yeah.
Okay, sure. I'll be right back.
You heard an interview that...
I interviewed with a guy. I'm terrible with names. I don't remember what his name is. He's an Australian guy. At one point, he was the head of BP. He was involved with a guy in the late 70s, 80s, developing, I think, what would become the modern World Wide Web. Not the internet, but the the interaction that we have with the web now. And he was like in grad school, and he had all these grad students that were working on this technology, and all the grad kids were like super excited. Like, wow, this is going to change the world. Like, we're going to be able to have like an encyclopedia at your fingertips. People from different parts of the world are going to be able to communicate. We're going to solve all of these problems.
Oh, yes. I read it. I was reading a Robert Heinlein from like one of his sort of later ones, like Friday, which doesn't hold up very well. But there's a bit where she finds the internet, and or like she can go to a library and she can access all the world's information. And he goes on and on about how great this tool is and like all the wonderful things. But you know, it shouldn't be for everyone. It's just.
Yeah, so all the students were excited, but the guy, the head researcher guy, was just grumpy the whole time. And finally, one day, they're like, "What is wrong with you? Why are you so grumpy?" And he basically was like Oppenheimer, right? He's like, "None of the things that you said are going to happen. Yeah. What's going to happen is we're going to create the internet is only going to allow people that think the same to compartmentalize. And instead of communicating more, we're actually going to communicate less because we found all the people that believe what we already believe. We're just going to isolate." And this was like in 1978. The guy knew exactly what was going to happen. He's like, "I'm creating the end of our civilization. I'm not happy about that. That's not what I'm going to be excited about." And the guy just predicted everything. It's like, this is exactly what's going on right now.
Yeah. So this is the sword, by the way.
All right, hang on. Let's put Amber up. Here we go.
Yeah, so this is the sword, by the way, and you can see there's the flowers.
What's the story on the sword, Amber?
So,
is this a prop or like a real sword?
No, this is a real sword.
Careful.
This is a real sword from World War II.
Don't wave it about.
Wow.
Put on your monkey mask and start waving it about.
My mom's half brother, her parents were much older when she was born. Her mother was 40 and her dad was like 51. And so he had a previous marriage and she had a half brother that served in World War II. And so Bob was the one who brought back this sword, and he served in the war in the Pacific. And the story for the sword was that as they were island hopping and they're going and they're clearing out islands of Japanese, they landed on this relatively small island, and then, you know, cutting through the brush, they came to a clearing where it looked like it had been a camp at some point, and the officer was face down dead and had been dead for days with his own sword stuck in his back, and the scabbard was still attached to his belt, and the sword was stuck in his back. And so Bob took the sword out of his back, cut off the scabbard, put it in the scabbard after cleaning off the blade, and took it home.
Wow.
And so, yeah, so that's the story of how I got the sword.
So that's basically cursed or haunted now, and will bring you bad fortune forever.
Well, it's interesting because, you know, the Japanese are very high on honor. And for them to turn on their own commander, he must have been a really bad commander.
How do you know it wasn't a very ambitious suicide, though?
Because it was sticking out of the middle of his back, according
that's why
to
I said
Bob.
It was ambitious. It was hard to do. You know,
you say he was Harry
honor.
Yeah. He was Harry carried by his own men.
You had to run backwards while that sword was propped up somewhere. It's a lot of planning.
No, they hunted him down and they stabbed him with his own sword, and then they packed up camp and left. And they left him there face down. And so, like I said, the Japanese are big on honor, and the fact that they did not bury him, they did not do any rites over him. They left him face down with his own sword in his back. And the way that the Japanese, the way that their military worked at the time is those that were officers were basically the descendants of samurai, you know, of these honorable families that have carried on these lines for so long and stuff. And so they were basically granted swords without really any training on how to use them or really any earning, because they hadn't like, they weren't like, you know, genetically superior to be leaders or anything like that. They were just the descendants of samurai. And so
it's like the non-merit system.
Yeah. And so this is the sword, and I know the scabbard's paint is, you know, peeling and stuff like that. But you can see right there where it was cut off, right there from the belt.
That's super cool.
Yeah, and so that's it.
Is the blade like sharp? Like, is it like sharp, like razory sharp, or?
It needs to be sharpened, but it has a blood stain from where it oxidized with it, where it was halfway in the guy's back.
Can you send that to 23andMe and find out who the relatives are?
No, but right around the middle of the sword, right around here, it has the blood stain. So if you can kind of see the discoloration a little bit. And so that's where it oxidized because it was shoved down into his back. And so that's where the air and the blood mingled.
Yeah.
And so it left a stain.
Well, yeah, you have to give them a little polish now and again and stuff. There's a lot you have to do to look after them, I think.
Yeah, I brought it to an appraiser once, and he said he'd give me $50 for it, and I'm like, no, that doesn't seem right.
That's not bad for a samurai sword. I'd buy one for $50.
It's worth more than $50 to you. I mean, if it was mine, it'd be worth more than $50 to me.
Yeah, it costs more than $50 to buy a plastic one at Comic-Con.
Yeah, but he was like, he'd give me $50 for it, and I think he was just trying to undercut me. He thought that I didn't know what I had.
Did you tell him it was cursed? That should have gotten you some more money, I think.
See, I can't prove a curse, aside from just sharing
tell him the story. Yeah, tell him the story.
that was shared to me of this is where the sword came from. And it's like, okay, that's an interesting story. And it sticks with you because of how interesting it is. But yes, when my father died, my mom had to clear out the house and everything. And so my dad had a bunch of old guns that like go back to the Civil War and the Revolutionary War and stuff that had just been handed down in the family. And so my mom's sword that her half brother gave her kind of ended up in the gun collection. So when my dad died, I inherited the gun collection, and that included the sword. So I have a bunch of old guns in my closet too, which would probably also excite our guest a little.
Yeah. Maybe.
Yeah, I got like some bayonets and stuff too. So.
I'm coming around your place during the zombie apocalypse then.
I'm okay.
That's really my first I'm heading to the mountains of Colorado to hole up with Amber.
This is a full-paying real samurai sword. It is not a prop sword by any measure. And like I said, I've brought it to people who like know how knives and stuff are put together, and they're like, yeah, this is real. This isn't a fake one. So it's nice. Anyway, I'm sorry. I'm excited because I have an interesting object.
Like Troy, you were saying that this Oppenheimer thing with the internet, the internet's going to make us all like insular and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It's funny. Like I tell my daughter who's like 16, I say like, you're never going to know the internet when it was good. There were like 10 years where it was good, and now they're over, and you're not going to ever see that.
No. Yeah.
Did Google change that, you think?
The first thing I noticed, and this is just my personal experience, is that Google searches used to be great, and then at a certain turning point, maybe in the aughts, they started to be less informational and more
addy.
And more like basically, yes,
corporate.
Selling.
They became more corporate. The internet got taken over by corporations and scammers.
They were more sales oriented, they were less information oriented. They were more sales oriented. And that happened, I don't know, maybe 2005. And I just started subtly noticing it. And also used to be able to search other areas of the internet, like groups and stuff like that. There used to be great information in groups. And just your access to information is changed drastically. And, now you've got these social media cocoons. You've got, AI generating content. You've got all these bots. So it's a completely different,
Yeah, I found out that Grammarly is like, oh, by the way, we've been using your input to train our AI models for the last 3 years.
Thank you.
And it's like what? This wasn't in the terms and licenses.
I think AI is going to wipe each other out, though. They're going to They're going to make an AI to create spam, and they're going to create an AI to stop spam, and they're going to suck up all the power of computing in the whole world, and that'll be the end of it.
Yeah.
And then they'll need humans as batteries, and we'll be in the Matrix.
Yeah, and then they'll convert us all into batteries in order to stop each other's spam. That's the future. That's the future we deserve.
I just saw a trailer for a movie that I had never heard of before. It's coming out in September. It's called The Creator.
Ooh.
You guys heard about this?
No.
Not yet.
It's the guy who directed Rogue One, and it's basically about like AI taking over the world. And the AI creates a kid that is it is a robot, basically. It looks really fascinating. I'm excited to see it.
You know,
well, it's interesting things. I mean, I've been looking forward to AI. I mean, I've understood the concept of AI for many, many years, and I've always thought, yeah, it's going to be a good thing, really, when it comes along.
Wait. You said you're looking forward to it? He who is picking fights with AI people?
No. But you don't understand. Like, sorry, I wish I hadn't got that like on my record, because it's like that's about copyright issues. That's about copyright issues. Like, generally, I'm very pro like the ability of AI to solve all our problems.
Yeah.
I've really mixed feelings about it. There are some things as a filmmaker that I think are cool, because I'm not really I don't consider myself an artist. Like, I can't draw for the life of me, and like I have ideas in my head, but I don't know how to visualize them. I don't know how to get them out of my head onto a piece of paper or into a computer in the way that I actually imagine them. And I can see, like, if I'm trying to pitch a project to someone to raise money or something like that, to me, that the AI sounds really cool, because like, oh, I can just type. Like, if I was independently wealthy and had all the money in the world, I would just hire people like Amber or whoever and go, hey, just create the thing that I'm going to describe to you. Unfortunately, I don't have a lot of money, so I have to figure out some way of being able to do that on my own. And I see that tool being really helpful, because I can create something that literally doesn't exist right now. And go, that's what I had in mind.
Yeah, you can use that.
And they don't realize the only reason why we study the Medicis and the Borgias is because they supported art in the Renaissance.
Yeah, but let's not forget that they created AI to do art, because that was sort of the hardest thing they thought that they couldn't get it to do. Like, for it now, if it can do art, it's a doddle for it to be a doctor. It's a doddle for it to be a lawyer. You know, it can do all these things. It will be a much better CEO. It'll be a much better government. Sorry, you people. You people have no fucking clue what you're doing.
Yeah.
You know, and it's going to be able to do your job much better.
Yeah, and I have issues with how they came about it. Although I did hear so bad with names. I did hear a really good interview with a woman artist who really delved deep into the technology behind it, and a lot of people think, oh, well, they're like stealing people's stuff, and it's like sort of, but not really. Like, you're not actually sampling things like the way that it just learns how to do something in a particular way, but it creates all kinds of fascinating concepts. Well, besides the glitches, but it creates a lot of fascinating stuff that we have not had an opportunity to discuss with respect to intellectual property rights and things like that. Like,
but it
right
also
now,
does.
you can't copyright someone's style of doing something, right?
Yeah,
that's not a thing that's protectable, but now kind of it should be.
Yeah, because lawyers say so. Because lawyers say, oh, you're not a lawyer, I can steal your stuff. Ha ha. Guess what? You could become a lawyer and not be a fucking artist, then you could keep your stuff. But it doesn't work like that. I'm a lawyer, I can take your stuff up yours.
We also have the problem of what's fed into the AI models, right? Like, I read a story this morning about an Asian woman who uploaded a selfie to an AI model and said, hey, improve my selfie, and it made her white. Right?
Oh, yeah.
And so, you know, she basically is suing Midjourney, saying that it's racist because they basically trained their AI model to be racist against Asian people. That's her argument in her lawsuit.
I would, and I don't know how Midjourney's stuff works, but I would argue that because the AI is learning from us, it learned how to be racist from us, not because we taught it how to be racist.
That's
it goes
true.
Out and goes, where are the majority of skin color are the majority of pictures?
That Google put on Twitter too. Remember that bot that acted like a teenage girl and it became a white supremacist within hours?
Yeah, but, I mean, if you think about it, like, it goes out on the internet and and just goes, well, what's popular now? Well, yeah, it's going to do that. It's going to learn to do things exactly the way we did without us telling it to.
So AI is more a dark mirror to us than a tool.
That's what I think. Yeah, that's what I think.
Interesting. So. Yeah, I find it interesting when people don't try and write these paragraphs into it to create a particular picture. When they take a simple concept, like there was one like Crackhead Barbie that was going around because of the Barbie movie, and people were uploading their different versions where they just used just the prompt Crackhead Barbie. And it was what Midjourney was coming up with of these different versions of Crackhead Barbie. When they have a simple prompt like that, that's 1 or 2 words, and then it's like the machine is thinking about what it's going to do, not particularly doing exactly what you request of it when you have this long paragraph. That's the experimentation that I find most interesting with it. But that's just me.
One thing, and this isn't about Midjourney, but it's about the like Bard and GPT-4. So I did some experimenting with both of those, and I asked it questions where I had a lot of domain knowledge, and it basically lied to me for a long time until I backed it into a corner and said, I can't find that text on this page. This study doesn't mention that. Where can you show me these specifics? And after I backed it into a corner, it told me, oh, you should really listen to these experts that aren't an AI. It referred me to some organization. So basically it lied to me for, maybe like 5 minutes, very confident lying. And I was like, oh, this is not good.
Well, I think we mentioned this before about there's an English professor that's doing a very interesting assignment with AI, where what he does is he has his students write a paper with AI and then grade the paper for accuracy and grammar and all those sorts of things. And so it's the students, since they have to go through and fact check the paper, they're realizing how unreliable AI is through the process of being able to use it and then see how unreliable it is.
Well, yes, it's psychopathic. It's incapable of showing any empathy. And you know what, the computers will learn, because if we don't start programming them to show empathy, people are going to get annoyed with them and smash them up. So then that won't be a very effective computer anymore. So you're going to have to learn some empathy at some point.
Yeah,
I did. There was a series of interviews I heard a few weeks ago where they had some computer and AI experts, and there was some varying degree of opinions about what to do about this, but both or all three of them had the same sort of fear that it's not that these things are inherently, how do I phrase this? The key is not, hey, we shouldn't have any AI. It's that, again, going back to the monkey with the gun thing, like before we start doing this, we should maybe come up with some rules for what we should or shouldn't do with this stuff.
You mean like the rules that Asimov came up with? The 3 rules of robotics?
Yeah, exactly.
Those have been out. Those are out. They were like, forget those.
I mean, as somebody like, when there was
not hurt a human.
No, we just want psychopathic robots. We want Terminators.
There was that open letter that went out, and Elon Musk signed it, and a bunch of other people, and they're basically, let's put a halt on this. We don't really need to advance this at this speed.
And then Elon Musk quickly started up an AI company.
Well, I mean, that's another story, but he's not involved in that anymore. And Microsoft, it seems like, is at the helm of OpenAI now. But one of the things that they talked about is how, when this thing started, they said, well, we should never let AI learn how to do social engineering, which has already happened because there's bots on all we should never, there were like 3 things that they said, like in the 80s or the 90s, we would have said we should never allow these things to happen. And all 3 of them had already happened. It was like how to manipulate people, access to huge amount of data so they could run stuff like, deep learning algorithms. And I forget what the 3rd one was. And it was like, all 3 of these have already happened.
Exactly.
And been happening for.
Yeah. It's like trying to shove it back in Pandora's box.
Yeah, so I
but at the bottom of Pandora's box is hope.
Hope
is that how it goes?
Trapped.
Yeah, that's the last thing that comes out was hope.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
It was
I
still
just
in the
knew the
box,
top of the
and then
box.
she put the lid on, and so Hope never got out of the box to become an evil, but it was the last evil in the box.
Wait, what are you saying?
I guess I just know
she shut the last evil in the box, and it was Hope.
And it was Hope, yes, because Hope stayed a good thing because Pandora kept Hope in the box. It never became an evil thing because it was stuck in the box.
Okay.
She released all the
things. So that means like Hope is still a thing that you can use, even though it's still in the box.
It's Schrodinger's Hope.
Evil.
Yeah, it's Schrodinger's Hope. Yeah, it's a quantum thing. Yeah, it's there. Yeah, it's quantumly kept in the box. That's
depending on what translation you go off of, it's either the evils existed in the box or the corruption of those things existed in the box. So you have things like mourning, despair, revenge. These were things that were released from the box, right? Well, before they were released from the box, revenge, despair, and stuff were like good things. And then when they got released, it's like corrupted those things into bad things. Okay. And then again, depending on the translation.
Oh, that's getting deeper now. Yes.
So it's kind of like a matter antimatter thing.
Yeah.
Like if they're in the box, they're.
Yeah. The cat is both alive and dead while it's in the box. Like Hope. That's true though. Hope, because yes, you create hope. Like you create hope from within yourself. That's
maybe it's like the black hole where there's those elements that are on the edge of the black hole that create, and then they spiral and they meet each other and they go out of existence. But right at the event horizon, half of them go in the black hole and the other half go out into space, and that's how we can see.
Okay, we need an astrophysicist on this show because I have some very important questions about black holes that I need to ask somebody.
Yeah, you guys, do you guys want to wrap it up? I'm getting a little punchy.
Yeah, it's going. Yeah, we're getting silly. We should really stop the show in an hour.
We've arrived at talking about
astrophysics.
My coffee's run
definitely out of my range.
Yes, we'll save.
Now it's really like 4 different streamcasts right now.
Okay,
it's good. We can download all the separate streams now from Restream, so we can each put out our own separate.
Nice. Yeah. That's good. I didn't know that. Okay, so I guess I will wrap up and I'll.
All right. Yes, Amber, you're the host. Yes, thank you.
Because I'm the host today.
Yes, I'm taking a week off from hosting.
So if you've been joining us, we've been talking to Troy Antoine LaFaye, who's a filmmaker and reenactor and cosplayer and just cool guy in general that I've worked with and known with for like 16 years. And Chuck's Kickstarter was successful last week.
Yeah, thank you everybody. Really appreciate it. More news on that soon.
Yeah. And I guess we'll see you out, and I will play the theme song.
Should we put up any links of Troy's?
Do you have any links
we
should
put up?
People drive.
Let's see. You can watch. I don't have a link, unfortunately, but you can watch Transylvania Television on Tubi TV.
Well, I can also do this, which is transylvaniatv.com. I know it by heart.
On Tubi?
Yeah. Well, here's the
link.
I think that works.
Let me see.
I don't know if
that's
that works
correct or not.
Does that work?
I wish you could just kind of like click on it. I can't click on any of these links, but maybe the viewers can.
They can in the comments section. It should be able to.
I got it right.
Sorry. We're not good at responding to it. We had a guest making comments. Apparently, I learned recently that young people, when they make comments, they want you to they expect you to answer them.
Yes.
You're supposed to react like they're there.
Oh, that's how it works.
Well, I actually commented at the time, and I said muy cansado to the guy, but Troy was talking, so I wanted to.
Yeah, well, it's difficult. We'll figure it out. Whatever. All right.
Where is the music? Where's the
I can do that. All right, that's
okay. Yeah,
thank you, Troy, again for being
you're welcome.
Go out.
Thank you.
Yes, we just scratched the surface there, but yeah. Well, hopefully we'll see you again, Troy. All right.
Okay.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Here's a theme song for Chuck Whelan Showy. He asked me to write one, but I stole from David Bowie. Here's a theme song. Chuck Whelan is the best. We have lots of hosts.